Hello and welcome to episode 81 of the Mouses Makes Knitting podcast. My name is Mandy, sometimes known as Mouse. This is Poppy, my co-host, who is on duty guarding us from a noise outside. I'm once again working with the overhead light on because it's about 3:30 in the afternoon and it's pretty dim and dull out there. Not necessarily because of the time, but because it just has been all day. Right. Lots to tell you about. Not much of it is knitting though. It's been a bit of a weekend. One of our older cats, Rose, Rose is Lily's sister. I'll put a picture in here actually of the Rosa. She's been a little bit off, and so we took her on Friday to the vet, and the vet said she had a heart murmur, took some bloods, rang on Saturday, said she had a degree of kidney failure, and I was kind of like, well, who doesn't? Join the club. But then on Saturday afternoon she got considerably worse, and I ended up taking her, with Peter's help, to see the emergency vet, and it turned out she had a urinary tract infection. So that was quite eventful and quite expensive. But she's on antibiotics, she's quite a bit brighter, so we're all a little bit less stressed about that. But I did get myself into quite a state on Saturday afternoon, and consequently, as I've mentioned before, I seem to manage to make my emotional trauma show on myself physically. So I now have a wrist that is extremely painful, all the way up to my elbow and sometimes my shoulder. So that's been hampering my knitting a little bit. I tried to cast on yet another Musselburgh hat for a new make-along that I'm taking part in, run by Danny from My Yarny Corner. I wanted to say Mouses Makes then, and I knew that was wrong because he's not my Danny, he's Alex's Danny. I have a Dave, not a Danny. Danny is hosting the Take It Easy make-along, where after the stress of knitting your Test Your Limits whatever for Alex's make-along, you can knit a Take It Easy thing or crochet for Danny's. So I was going to cast on a Musselburgh, except that it requires more twisting around than my wrist is prepared to allow at the moment. So I've got about the size of an old 2p worth of Musselburgh, so I'm not going to bother and show you that because that would be a bit pointless. I'm looking at my notes because I've already distracted myself and talked about stuff I didn't mean to yet anyway. Oh yes, the other make-along that I am joining in quite happily isn't really a make-along as such, but it's kind of I don't know quite how to describe it. Ruth from Ruth Loves to Knit posted on Instagram that she's not running a make-along, but she is having a hashtag Feel Free in 23, which is an extension of her It's My Knitting, so I'll cast on if I want to. So of course I cast on a couple of new things, one of which being the Musselburgh, which I'm not going to show you. The other thing I am going to show you in a little bit because it ties in with something else. So, sock disaster. Last time I showed you these socks that I was making for Denise's Year of the Sock make-along. The January prompt is Snowdrop. So I was knitting these socks and I was sat knitting on them and looking at them and thinking, there's something not quite right here. and I counted all my stitches, and I had the same number of stitches on both. I was knitting them in tandem, which is something that I don't normally do. But I thought one looks bigger than the other. Counted the stitches. Stitches were all fine. Perhaps it's just because one's on white yarn and the other's on green and it's an optical illusion. Nope. One is bigger than the other. And the reason for that is that I was knitting one sock on a 2.25mm needle and the other sock on a 2mm needle. So I wasn't terribly happy with them to begin with. I didn't really want green and white stripy socks, even though I'd decided to knit them. Nobody made me. So I stopped those and I cast on something else. I cast on this sock, which is attached to 2 balls of wool at the moment, so it's a bit hard to show you. This was going to be the Easy Mosaic sock. I can't remember who it's by. It's a free pattern and I will link it down below. And I got this far with it and I thought to myself, do you know what? I don't really want white socks. I've got lots of colourful socks and I want this year to knit some darker socks. White didn't really fall into that plan, so I abandoned this one as well. The yarns I was using, let me get them both up the right way. They're both West Yorkshire Spinners, Marshmallow and Chocolate Lime. No more green and white socks. The other thing I cast on was a sock to replace those, which, oh, there it is. I've lost it. It's in front of my nose. So rather than going with a snowdrop colour theme, I'm going with a snowdrop pattern name. I don't know if you can see this. It's a lacy sock. It's by Sarah or Sarah Morris, and it is again a free pattern. I will link it below. And the yarn that I'm knitting it in is something rather special. So I'm going to talk about that a bit later. The toe, this is knit in West Yorkshire Spinners Nutmeg, which goes very nicely with the rest of the yarn that I'm going to talk about in a bit. So those were the 2 things that I cast on, these socks and the beginnings of a Musselburgh. Next, I'm going to tell you about my Starflake. I feel like I'm rushing through this, and I probably am, but I want to tell you at the end about the shop update, and not everybody's going to want to watch that. So I should really be trying to drag the knitting out a bit longer, shouldn't I? Right, calm down, Mandy. Chill out. Sorry, darling. Starflake Make Along, which I am hosting. It runs from the 1st of January to the 28th of February, and the hashtag on Instagram is purely Starflake. No mal, no KAL, nothing at the end of it, unless you're posting your finished object, in which case it's Starflake FO. That was hard work. There is also, or there are also, I should say, 2 threads on Ravelry, on the Mouses Makes page, 1 for chatter, 1 for finished objects. I've had a bit of a fight with mine. So if you're not familiar, and I expect everybody is, but just in case, this is, where are you? This is the Starflake shawl. I showed you mine that I'd started last week. I should just move that closer really, shouldn't I? Let's put it there. This is the one that I had started. And I wasn't very happy with it because it was, well, you can see me through it. I thought the gauge was far too loose. I just didn't like it. I'm not so sure now. Now that I'm looking at it again, I think it would just have been quite drapey and nice. But that's water under the bridge. It's way too late to change my mind again. I was knitting this on a metal needle on a 3.75, which is what the pattern calls for. And I thought perhaps if I tried it on a wooden needle, it might tighten my gauge up a bit. It didn't. I tried it, I cast it all on, I knit 1.5 of the parallelograms and it wasn't a lot better at all. So I did maths. Don't ask me what maths or how I did the maths, but it made sense to me at the time. I worked out the gauge I'd got against the gauge that I should have, using the needle that I was using, and if I were to increase my stitch count to meet gauge, what needle did I need to use? And basically it was a 3mm, which was what my instinct was telling me anyway. I could have saved myself the brain ache. So I've gone right down to a 3mm. I've also changed this yarn. I'm using two, I was going to say two contrasts. Oh, that sounded funny. This is actually, oh, where are we? This is actually the contrast. Everything is falling. This is Cascade Heritage in Highlighter Violet. And this is actually technically, because of where I'm placing it, the contrast yarn. For the main colour, oh, this is going to fall out my hand. Wait and see. Why am I juggling? Excuse this. I can't edit it out. I'm using these two. This is going to really hurt. I'm using these two. One is much more highly coloured than the other. So I'd begun by using the more highly coloured one. I'm just tossing stuff on the floor left, right and centre here. And I've got loads to do after I finish this. And now I'm going to have to spend time picking stuff up. I've forgotten what I was saying. I've stopped using this yarn and I've swapped it for the lighter coloured one. And I've used this one elsewhere. So, actually let me put that there. Let me stop rambling and show you. It's on quite a short needle, so this might be a little bit tricky. But I think you can see that what I've done is used the lighter contrast yarn in my parallelograms and then used the darker variegated in this section where it's stocking stitch. And I was right, it does look much better in stocking stitch. You can get the colours than it did as garter stitch, where it just looked a bit messy. Let me see if I can. So I've got this far. The parallelograms are section 1. This is section 2, sort of a chevron all the way around the parallelograms, which means that my next section, there's a choice. You can do brioche or you can do garter stripes. Well, we all know I'm doing the brioche. So I'm looking forward to doing that. But you can decide whether to have your contrast colour as the front colour or your main colour. I think I'm going to go with the contrast and use the lighter, this one behind it in the brioche. I think that will look the best. And it also leaves me this much of the darker one for later on in the shawl, where I can do something similar and show off the pretty variegated yarn. That's the plan at the moment. There have been a few mistakes. It's not the neatest thing I've ever done. I don't know if you can see this mess here. There are a few places like that, and places where I've not quite picked up the stitches in the right place. They should be round here a bit, and they're here. This is my third attempt at it, so it wasn't getting pulled down. And my feeling is, I tend to wear these like a scarf, so it's going to be all cobbled up around my neck. Who's going to see that? Nobody. And if I'm wearing it round my shoulders like a traditional shawl, my hair's going to cover that bit, so it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I will try and do better when I cast on my Starflake for Caroline Aribark's make along after I finish this. I wanted to finish this first because there are slight differences in the pattern, and I did not want to confuse myself any more than I'm capable of confusing myself without the distraction of doing two patterns that are almost exactly the same but not quite. I'm in two minds with the Starflake. It is a DK pattern. I'm in two minds whether to do it in DK or whether to do it in 4-ply. I'm going to have a look at how large it will be when it's finished and compare that to the size of the anthology throw that I'm knitting. Sorry, brain completely blank then. Because I don't want an enormous blanket. So if knitting it in DK is going to make it huge, I might do it in 4-ply. Either acrylic or dye up some of this stuff. We shall see. I'm not even going to worry about that till after I finish this. This is part of my Stephen West marathon for this year. I should make that a hashtag actually, shouldn't I? I might do that. And I've given myself 2 months for every shawl that I'm doing apart from one, which is the Pagona in September. I've only got September to do that because the KAL starts in beginning of October usually. My plan is that I'm going to take a month, maybe a little bit longer, and then have a bit of a rest, at least a couple of weeks rest before I start the next one while I finish other things, because I currently have 4 Stephen West shawls on the needles all at the same time. This one, the Flying Foxtail wrap that I showed you last week, the Slip Stravaganza that I started last year, and the Aurora Cabin, which I'm going to show you in a minute, but not because I want to show you my progress, for another reason. I have been watching a very lovely lady called Tina, whose podcast is called Simply in Stitches. I think I linked it a little while ago. If not, I will try and remember and link it again today. She's also knitting the Aurora Cabin and has been, let me pull this. I feel like I'm on Blue Peter. Here's something I prepared earlier. She's knitting it and has been cutting her yarns in the section where you're using all 5 colours. So I was going to show you, all of you, but specifically this is aimed for you, Tina, how I deal with my yarns. Let me move this. This is not part of the story. Let me move that. So I'm going to have to tip the camera down a second. And you're going to be upside down because you're looking at it from the other side. So let me see if this works. Oh, Actually, I'm going to have to hold it. So I've got this little fold up table and I have all my yarns on it. And the ones that I'm not actively using, because you only use one colour at a time. So these 4 are just slid over to the left. The one that I'm working from I've got on my right. And then, let me bring you up a little bit. What I'm doing as I go along is I'm just securing and hiding all my other yarns in the I-cord as I go. At the moment I'm still putting the ends in, the tails from where I've joined the colours in. So all of those are going into this I-cord. And there is a tutorial on one of the Aurora Cabin, I'm sure it's on an Aurora Cabin tutorials by Stephen West. Sorry, brain went entirely blank again. Where he shows you how to do this. So essentially, as you're knitting your I-cord, you wrap your working yarn. Let's pretend this one is my working yarn. It's not, it's an end, but we're pretending. You wrap it around and then work with it. So as you do that, you're enclosing all those yarns in your I-cord border. And let me show you. You can't tell. They're all in there from, this is the previous 5 colour section. They're all in there. And then when I cut my ends, I just secured them inside as I did the next section. It's an alternative to doing, I'm tipping you up again, hang on. Sorry, I hope that hasn't made you poorly. Oh, that will though. No. That's better. Yeah, it's an alternative to doing the weaving Stephen. Because when I do the weaving Stephen, I find it messes with my tension. I don't know if that's because I am an English style knitter, so I'm letting go of my yarn to wrap the end around and then picking it back up again. I think that's probably what the problem is. Whereas if I were knitting continentally, I'd have the other hand to wrap it and I'd be keeping the tension on my working yarn. There is another way that I weave ends in as I go, but it's a bit more visible on a shawl. And I don't know if I can describe this, but as I knit, with the tail, I lift it up while I knit a stitch, then I hold it down while I knit a stitch. And that sort of zigzags it like this into your stitches as you work, on the back of your work. That's not as visible on the right side, but it is quite easy to see on the wrong side. So when I'm knitting a shawl, I tend to just sew my ends in. Same when I'm knitting a sock, if I'm adding in colours. Even when I've done a scrappy sock, I'll sew the ends in afterwards. I don't actually mind sewing in ends. I know some people it's the thing that puts them off. This is the first time that I've tried this, hiding my ends in the I-cord, and it works. So I'm doing the same thing on my Starflake. I hope that's helpful and wasn't just a load of nonsense that's confused everybody even more. So specifically for you, Tina, that's what I do rather than a weaving Stephen. And I think you could still do that even if you were cutting your ends as you change colours each time. I think you could still hide them in your I-cord. Just leave, you know, a good 3-4 inches so that it's not going to work itself loose. What have I to tell you now? Done that bit. Right, all that's left to show you is stuff for the shop update. So if you're not interested in that, that's fine. It's been lovely spending some time with you, and I will see you hopefully next week, assuming I can actually knit anything to show you next week. For those of you that are sticking around to see what goodies I have in store for you, I'm doing things a little bit differently with this shop update. I spoke to you last week about how I want to try and give the business a go. And there was kind of a brainstorming session last week with some friends on Zoom. And what came out of it were some ideas. And this is one of them. Previously, what I've done is I've dyed up 2 or 3 skeins, put them in the shop. First come, first served, and that's it. What I'm going to try this time is dyeing to order. So with the exception of 1 skein that's left over from my last shop update, everything I'm showing you today is going to be dyed to order. I'm giving myself a turnaround of 2 weeks. It won't take that long, but I don't know if there are going to be more postal strikes, so I'm trying to factor that in. I'm trying to factor in the fact that I might run out of dye, or I might run out of yarn, and then I might be poorly. I'm intending to dye 2 days a week, on a Wednesday and on a Saturday, which gives me extra days if I need to dye in between times. But equally, if I'm really poorly and I can't manage one of those days, I've got time to catch up with myself. So I'm giving it 2 weeks from your order being placed to me posting your order, but I don't anticipate it taking me that long. That's just giving myself some leeway, because obviously it's got to be dried, and I want to make sure it's properly dry before I skein it up and wrap it and what have you. So that's how it's going to be different this time, with the exception of that 1 skein that's left over. There is one that I can't show you because it is from a previous shop update, but I'm putting that into this one as a dyed to order as well. And that is Iris, and I'm going to put a picture of Iris up here. That will also be on a dyed to order basis now. So, new stuff. First of all, there is this one. And I'm hoping that the colours are coming out okay, because, as I say, overhead light. This is Irish Coffee. Kind of speaks for itself. Basically, it's a lovely rich brown, which is a bit warmer than it's looking there, which then fades. Can't see the fade terribly well. Fades back into cream, just like a glass of Irish coffee. Oh no, don't do that, Mandy. Twist the other hand. Just like a glass of Irish coffee with your nice whiskey coffee with the cream sat on top. So there's that one. Apparently I can't skein up yarn at the moment either. That's inconvenient. So that's Irish Coffee. Then there's this one. This one, named by Ewan, is Fade to Grey. And again, it kind of speaks for itself, really, doesn't it? No, don't do it that way. Sorry, didn't mean to yell. I cannot twist my wrist. And I'm very right-handed, and this is making it very difficult. Yeah, no inspiration for that other than I like grey and black. You may have noticed. Now we get on to things that are a little bit brighter. This skein gave me quite a lot of trouble. I had 2 goes at this until I was happy with it. I'm going to put in here somewhere, I'm going to put the inspiration picture. This is Red Sky at Night. Hopefully you are currently looking at the inspiration picture as well, if I have not messed it up. I'm going to unskein it. It's probably not the best idea, but never mind. Oh, ow. So you've got warm, peachy, golden yellow and purpley mauve tones. Really just trying to capture the same colours that you get on a Red Sky at Night. This one I'm very, very pleased with. I like it a lot. It took me a while to get it as I wanted, but when I got there I was quite happy with it. Itchy nose, sorry. The other bright and colourful one, again named by Ewan, this is Bubblegum. I have a feeling it's very similar to something that Alex and Danny do, and it was not meant to be a copy, it just happened. Pink, turquoise, and where they join there's some really pretty sort of mauvey tones coming out. That's Bubblegum. I shouldn't have put this table here because now I'm doing this, which is actually quite comfortable, but probably not very good for my back. Then I told you that I wanted to do, I'm calling it the Year of Yarn. So each month is going to have a specific colourway that will only be available until the end of that month. Obviously January is a little bit halfway through nearly, but this is January's yarn. And I'm going to put the inspiration picture for it in here. This obviously, they're hand dyed, so they're not all going to look exactly the same, but they will all be much the same. So you've got a dark grey, quite tonal, variegated grey, and then a splash of this orangey brown. And this is the yarn. Let me just try and get it a little bit so that it doesn't get in a knot. Oh, this is very bad when you have a wrist that doesn't want to twist. I need a yarn winder. Where is my assistant? This is the yarn that I'm knitting my socks in. So this is it caked up. And this is how it's knitting up. And that's blowing out a bit, I think, because it's got the bright colour on the bottom. If I cover that up a bit. So this is only tying in to Denise's Year of the Sock because I'm knitting a snowdrop sock pattern with it. But that's how it's knitting up. I'm really happy with it. So that's January's, which will only be available until the end of January. But it will be dyed to order until literally the last day of January. And then February, Indonesia's Year of the Sock, is going to be violet. And so I've dyed up a skein of violet yarn, and again I'm going to put in the inspiration photo here. The light is really blowing out the colours. They are a bit darker than they're showing there, but what I've tried to do, hopefully you can still see the picture, I don't know. I'm not very good at making things stay on the screen for as long as I want them to. Sometimes they're on for ages, sometimes they flash up and disappear. You may still be looking at it, I'm not sure. So I've tried to get all the purples and mauves that are in the picture of the flower, which I would have said was a pansy. But I did an image search and that's what came up. And I've also got in a little bit of yellow and some black speckling. And I'm not going to unwind this one because my wrist is very angry with me at the moment. So that's violet. Violet is February's Year of the Sock prompt. So this is going to go into this shop update and this will be available until the last day of February. And then it will go into the mists of time. Oh, I'm just talking nonsense now. You won't be able to get it again come 1st of March. But by then, what I'm planning to do is each month have the next month's yarn ready. So the middle of February, you should be able to start, if you are interested, ordering the yarn that I've dyed up for March's prompt, which I think is daffodil. I think it's daffodil. I've got it written down. Let me look. It's even got a special tab in my diary. Yes, March is daffodil. But I'm planning something a little bit less than obvious, I'm hoping. So those are the yarns that are going into the shop. By the time you see this, the shop should be open again. It depends how long it takes me to get all this stuff uploaded. There will also be Iris, which I don't have a skein of to show you, but I think I put the picture in at the beginning. And there is one skein left of Ladies in Lavender. Let me grab that actually. Yeah, there is one skein of this, which is Ladies in Lavender. And that's not a colourway I'm going to repeat. For purely selfish reasons, I don't especially like it. And bearing in mind, any yarn that I dye up that nobody else wants, I end up keeping. So there's little point dyeing it up if I don't like it, is there? So yeah, there is one single skein of this. This is not dyed to order. This is it. All the rest will be dyed to order. I think that's everything I had to tell you. Check my notes. Yes, it is. Apart from the fact I've just remembered, I'm supposed to tell you that Ewan is apparently my favourite son and has bought me some delicious freshly baked ginger cookies home from work. He wants you to know that. Now you know. So I'm going to go and have a cup of coffee and one of my delicious freshly baked ginger cookies, which have been hunter-gathered by Ewan. Poppy's left. I didn't even see the going of her. She might have gone while I was getting the yarn. So, I was going to say from Poppy and me, but she's gone without us, so never mind. From me, anyway, because I actually have the manners to say bye-bye rather than just run off. I will see you next week. And until then, happy knitting. Bye, guys.